welcome to One Great History, a podcast about the great and sometimes not so great parts of Winnipeg history that we think are fascinating. I'm one of your hosts, Sabrina.
And I'm Alex.
And we're joined as always by our producer, Nick.
How's it going?
And today's episode is all about Winnipeg Urban Legends.
Yes, so the source of a lot of these is the fact that you and I have both worked extensively as tour guides.
Yeah, we talk a lot with the public, which means we hear all of the public's weird theories on things.
Yeah, and they ask us if things are true.
When so often they are not.
No, and it's not fun to tell people that things aren't true.
Well, I found often that people don't like to be wrong.
Yes.
Either.
Yeah, sometimes it's not so much a question as, oh, did you know this thing? And I'm like, well.
It's the high-pitched well is always a sign you've gone astray in a tour.
Or sometimes I hadn't heard that. Or sometimes, oh, well, I had heard that, I don't know.
Yeah, there's been some...
Many diplomatic answers.
Yes,
but
so many.
What would you say is the worst tour that you have ever given?
This one has gone down in, I think, infamy. Because I used to tell all of the tour guides I would train this story, and they would all say, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. And it was a day where we were doing walk-in tours, and this woman walks in with like a wheelie cart behind her, and she sits down and goes, I'd like a tour. And we're like, oh, okay, you're in the right place. Okay. And she pays for the tour up front and then complains about a tour she had taken earlier in the day.
Oh, no.
She said it was on a bus and all they talked about was animals and she learned nothing.
Okay, not a good start.
Well, I at first was like, what tour did you take?
Is that at the zoo?
It must have been, because like I've taken the bus tour in Winnipeg. They talk about more than just animals.
I would imagine.
Did she wind up accidentally at the zoo? That's my only theory. Was she just
on like the little cart that they drive around at the zoo?
Maybe. I don't know. I have no idea because I didn't ask further because
right.
I didn't think it would be wise.
Yes.
To ask too much about this person.
No.
So we go outside and we're in Old Market Square and I start talking and then she goes, oh, you don't have to do any of that with me. I'm on vacation. I'm not here to learn.
Oh, but that's the tour.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I don't know what to tell you then. But also she has paid for an hour and a half of my time.
Oh, no. And doesn't want to know your facts.
Yeah.
What does she think a tour is?
I don't know. Like, we went around a little bit and I'd be like, this building is art space. And that was about the extent that she wanted to hear from me.
Okay.
But we had barely made it to Old Market Square when she went, oh, I need to eat.
Okay.
And I went, all right.
And how long of a tour had this been at this point?
Maybe 10 minutes.
Oh, no.
So I'm like, okay, well, like, there's a food cart right there. We can go look at that. And she went, okay. And then looked and went, I don't want any of this. And then the rest of the tour was basically me walking her going, this building was a warehouse. It's a store now. And she would go, I don't need any more of this. And then would look at like a restaurant menu on the door and be like, don't like this.
What?
And, yeah, I know. So we get to close to where the public safety building, I guess, was now. And we're going to like walk through the walkway. And she went, I'm not doing stairs. I was like, well, I guess we'll just like take the long way around then.
Yeah.
And we wind up by the bench at City Hall that is an ad for a company in Chinatown.
Okay.
And she goes, why is that in Chinese? Right. And I go, well, there's Chinatown. And then she goes, oh, can we go there? I want Chinese food. And by this point, I've been giving a tour for about 45 minutes. It is mind-boggling, boring, and bad. Yeah. And I'm like, well, we may as well do this now. Okay. So we went to Chinatown, and we walk into a restaurant that's, like, pretty upscale.
Right.
And the woman starts arguing with the waiter about what they have and do not have on the menu.
Oh, no.
The waiter does not speak English as fluently as this woman does.
Right.
And the fight goes on for at least 5 minutes. And at one point, I excuse myself to stand in the washroom and just, like, try and think of an escape plan. Because I'm like, I can't keep doing this. I don't know how to escape this situation anymore.
You don't want to be associated with this person who's, like, berating this poor
No, it didn't feel good.
Employee.
So I come up, and she's like, okay, they don't have what we want. Let's go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, there's a buffet across the street. We'll try that. And we walk in, and she starts ordering, and she wants, I believe it was the fried rice and, like, chicken.
Okay.
And as this is going on, I begin to realize she only has $10 on her.
Okay.
And what she is ordering is more than $10.
What?
And then starts trying to buy me a drink.
Is this just a crazy person? Like,
I don't know. So I had to be like, oh no, I just don't drink pop to get her to stop offering. And she went, you're one of those people.
Oh my God.
And then finally, the poor girl at the till went, oh, you want the chicken and the fried rice? That's exactly $10.
Oh, bless her.
So this woman gets her food, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. This was so bad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say, I had to go back to my office. There is a tour waiting.
Right.
This was not untrue. There was a tour that was waiting, but one of my coworkers had already taken it out.
Okay.
So I tell her that. She goes, oh, go ahead. And I run back to my office.
Thank goodness.
And I sit down and think I'm in the clear. And then the woman walks back into my office.
No!
And she sits down. And I'm like, oh, there's no tour coming. I don't know how to get out of this situation.
You can't like conjure up fake tour guests.
Well, what I tried to do was say, oh, I'm going to go meet them in Old Market Square and not at our office. And she said, okay, I'll walk with you.
No!
Yeah. So we walk to Old Market Square. She sits down and I stand by the cube.
Yeah.
Until I pretend to take a phone call and go back to the office. And then I believe I sat in my office and didn't do anything for a full hour because I couldn't process what had just happened.
Oh, man. Well, that makes mine seem a little better, to be honest.
No one was mean to waitstaff with you?
No one was mean to waitstaff. They're just... So, I mean, I've had a few rough ones, but I think probably the worst was they were like little kids, like probably 5 or 6. And, okay, so at my old workplace at the museum, we used to divide groups into 2. So one group would end up with a teacher and the other would just get like a parent supervisor. And it was often kind of a nightmare if you got that group.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Right. So I was with that group, which already is not a good start. And then we sit down on the ground and I'm like pulling things out of this trunk and some of the kids will not stop touching my hair.
What?
So this is not the first time I've had this issue. I have like, so for listeners, I have kind of reddish, curly-ish hair. And for some kids, this is like fascinating.
Yeah.
For some reason. So they would not stop touching my hair. Like
weird.
I kept telling them like, okay, no, we're not doing that. And like, I'm not going to yell at these poor kids who just want to touch my hair. So finally, I'm like, okay, I'm going to stand up and take them somewhere because then they can't reach my hair.
Yep.
So I stand up and start doing more of like the tour bit with them. And I take them over to one of the dioramas and we're looking in and one of the kids straight up jumps into the diorama.
No!
Yeah. Which of course is full of artifacts and has been very carefully put together.
And things that you shouldn't let a child like run loose around.
No. And so I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't know what to do. I like had to bodily pull him out of the diorama.
Where was the parent in all of this?
He was just standing there. And like, I think like the kid afterwards, I like told him in my like very firm voice that like, you cannot do that. And then the worst thing is though, like the other group is still doing their thing. I still have to be with these kids for another like 45 minutes at this point.
Oh, no.
It was just a nightmare of me trying to take them somewhere, like to enough places for like a short enough time that they would not get bored and start doing crazy things.
You should have just made them run laps.
Yeah. But you can't do that at the museum.
Oh no.
So it was a nightmare. The diorama was fine, I guess. Afterwards, I went upstairs and cried and called my boyfriend.
Yeah.
My boss came in just at the point as I was saying, and then he jumped into the log cabin and looked at me like, what? I think I'm the only person that ever happened to.
Oh my God. Yeah, so tours were always an interesting experience.
Yes.
But they were a great way to sort of learn about things people think are true about Winnipeg.
Yes, I heard lots, yeah.
So I'm going to ask both you and Nick, what's your favorite Winnipeg urban legend? And also, please don't say one I didn't research because it will make this episode worse.
Okay, one that I've had to debunk a couple of times is that streets in Winnipeg were named after sex workers.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that one a lot too.
Yeah.
A city councilor I met thought it was true.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard that one from, like, people who otherwise don't believe ridiculous things.
Yeah.
But
Is that one Guy Madden's fault?
Is
that where that originated from? Or?
I feel like a lot of them are Guy Madden's fault.
But I do think that's where a lot of people get it.
Yeah. So just to be clear, Guy Madden did a film called My Winnipeg, which incorporates, like, some true things and some not true things, and people tend to get the facts a little muddied.
Yeah.
Well, that's like, it's a documentary. Like, that's how he pitched it first. But he has an actor named Darcy Fair playing his proxy. And Darcy, as Guy, is trying to get out of Winnipeg.
Yeah.
But he can't leave Winnipeg. And so we're subjected to all of these, like, all the true things are pretty insane compared to the actual things he comes up with. But I remember my sister had to like write a paper on it or something in university, and having to explain to her what the real and not real things, like she's like, did horses really freeze in the water like that?
Oh,
Nope.
I'm sure horses got cold in Winnipeg.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure at least one horse did freeze in the river, but it wasn't like a consistent thing.
Yeah.
No, I also have not seen Guy Madden's My Winnipeg, I think largely out of spite.
Yeah, I watched it once and wasn't thrilled by it, but also I'm not like the most artsy film person in the world, so it maybe just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine.
There's often a Guy Madden proxy. I think there's another one, Cowards Bend the Knee, where Darcy plays Guy. But then there's another one, Brand Upon the Brain. I think there's a Guy character in that one, but it's different. Yeah.
So he gets a character to play himself?
Yeah, like he creates all these fictional histories of himself and of Winnipeg, and yeah.
Okay, so to everyone listening, I mean, enjoy your Guy Madden films. Don't get your history from them. Maybe
Please do not.
From like semi-fictionalized films.
But I think part of the issue with that then ties into why something like an urban legend is so popular.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's sort of like the old saying, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yes.
At some point, the story is going to be way more fun than whatever the truth is.
If I'm honest, I've totally been guilty of that as well.
Oh, yeah, I have too.
I wrote one tour that I literally started with like a disclaimer that I got a lot of this from like old tabloids. It might not be true.
Yeah.
I think some of my favorite stuff is just like the urban legends around the Royal Albert.
Oh, yeah.
Like how people have been murdered there, and Susan Sarandon or Jennifer Lopez's jewelry wound up there at a murder scene when they were in town filming Shall We Dance. Like, and I think that some of this stuff is true, but like there's been like you never know what's real in the Winnipeg music and whatever scene and at the Royal Albert.
I feel like a lot of the it's funny. I feel like maybe urban legends say something about what we think of ourselves as a city.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of them make Winnipeg seem more like criminal and scary than it actually is.
Well, that's sort of a staple of like an urban legend, is that they're supposed to be frightening. They're supposed to like do a moral lesson in some way or another. Mm-hmm. But generally what it is they're supposed to stick with you. It's supposed to be evocative or like connect with you on some emotional level. Mm-hmm. And there have been studies about like why these tend to like spread through communities, and generally, it's that they have to be true enough to feel plausible, but then have like 2 to 3 things that aren't.
Right.
So something has to feel wrong about it.
Okay, interesting. Right? Yeah, so like there is...
It's counterintuitive elements is what they're called.
So like if I think about the one about the street names, that makes perfect sense because like, yes, there are several streets named after women.
Yeah.
In downtown, like more than maybe other cities have.
Yeah, we can get into that when we get closer to, because I did debunk that one. That is in my list of research topics.
I'll let you talk about it then.
But I think the fun thing to do as we go through these is to try and figure out what the grain of truth is in them and sort of where they deviate from what that is.
Right.
So we're going to start with a low ball. Okay. It's not that exciting. And it's going to require some explaining for any younger listeners. Because it's that Bob Hope played his first round of golf in Winnipeg. So this you know who Bob Hope is.
I know who Bob Hope is because
we're both grandmas at heart.
I'm 87 years old.
I assume, Nick, you also know who Bob Hope is.
Of course I know who Bob Hope is.
So if you are, let's say, under 30 and maybe hipper than Alex and I, Bob Hope was a really famous comedian.
You don't spend all your time listening to CJNU.
Yeah. Bob Hope was a really famous comedian in the 20th century. He got his start in vaudeville. He went into stand-up and TV later on. He did a series of movies with Bing Crosby. They're called the Road 2 series. Alex and I have both watched those.
A little bit racist, but...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a little bit racist. But he also hosted the Academy Awards 19 times.
Okay.
Like, Bob Hope was a big celebrity for the time. He was a big deal. But also, he was really into golf.
Okay.
Like, this was his big side project. He played in as many as 150 charity golf tournaments per year. And the rumor is that Bob Hope played his first round of golf while touring in the vaudeville circuit in Winnipeg in the 1930s. So if this were true, it would mean that one of the most famous celebrity golfers got his start in Winnipeg, which is a pretty big claim to fame.
I guess. That one's funny because it's like, so what? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think you're that into golf, though.
It might be that. It might be that I don't care if he plays.
Yeah. Like, it's a cool piece of sports history.
Yeah.
And it is almost true. It could possibly be true. So, Bob Hope was performing in the vaudeville circuit in the 1930s, and he was with the Orpheum, or the RKO sort of vaudeville.
So he did play here.
Yeah, he did, actually.
Or performed here.
Yeah. So his touring circuit went through Winnipeg, Calgary, Seattle, Tacoma, and Vancouver. And he was playing alongside other sort of big performers like the Diamond Brothers. But I'm going to make Alex ask, because vaudeville is bizarre. What do you think the Diamond Brothers did? What was their shtick?
Oh, boy. So many things happened in vaudeville.
I guess also to be clear, vaudeville was a type of theater that was sort of like America's Got Talent without the judges. It's a big variety act.
Okay, so they performed alongside Bob Hope?
They didn't play together. They were separate acts in one vaudeville show.
Okay, I'm going to guess that the Diamond Brothers were acrobats.
Jugglers.
Oh, that was going to be my other guess.
So you're close. But the Diamond Brothers were avid golfers.
Okay.
And apparently eventually talked Hope into going golfing with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the rumor claims that it was in Winnipeg. But if you look at their performing dates, Hope played in Winnipeg on February 1st.
No.
So it was...
So if you're listening from outside Winnipeg, it's a very good reason you can't golf here in February.
It was minus 13 degrees, and every golf course in Winnipeg was closed.
Yeah.
And in fact, Hope later on said in a magazine called Golf and Sports Turf, in 1930, my real love affair with golf began. I was in vaudeville playing the Orpheum circuit on the northern route. I was doing afternoon and evening shows in Winnipeg and Calgary up in Canada, and then in Minneapolis and Seattle and Tacoma. Then one day in Seattle, they invited me to come along. I borrowed a set of clubs and started hitting the ball pretty well. To my surprise, I got hooked on golf that day, and I've been addicted to it ever since.
Okay, so that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
That it was Seattle and not Winnipeg.
Yeah. But what probably happened is someone heard Winnipeg in that anecdote and got confused.
Right.
But the grain of truth there is that he was in Winnipeg on that same tour, right?
Right, and on that tour began playing golf.
With the golfers, too.
Right.
So you can sort of see how that all, merges together to become a different thing, but that's a really easy one to debunk.
Yep, although the mental image of Bob Hope trying to play golf in February.
Just, slipping on ice with this juggling troupe he's gone with. Yeah. Could slip and juggle some balls like a real vaudeville slapstick
that
act.
does sound like a fun act, actually.
So... that one you don't hear so often anymore, I think, because Bob Hope isn't
People don't care about Bob Hope so much
He's
anymore.
not a talking point anymore. So the next one is actually the one you brought up earlier, the street names for sex workers.
Right.
Which is a huge one. I heard that on at least one tour a day, I would say.
I definitely, that's one that I heard a lot when I was doing, Winnipeg history tours.
Yeah. Okay, so the rumor is pretty simple. It's that street names like Lily and Annabelle in Winnipeg's downtown were named for sex workers or mistresses of famous politicians.
Right.
And it's not unbelievable based on Winnipeg's relationship with sex work.
Yeah.
When you look at when Winnipeg was becoming a city in the 1870s, we were a boomtown.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of men coming through at a rapid pace, and there's not really many opportunities for women, especially disenfranchised ones.
Right.
So a lot turned to sex work to make a living and to survive. And it became kind of like an accepted fact of life. People didn't like it.
Sanctioned by the police in some cases.
Yeah, we briefly tried to legalize it, in fact. Yeah. So based on that, you can see why someone might think, oh, well, obviously a councilman would name a street after his favorite mistress.
Right.
But
although I can't imagine his wife would be happy if he tried that.
So
that's kind of where it falls apart, is
thinking about the actual social implications of this.
Or the actual process of going through the business of naming a street.
So the horrifically boring reality of all of this is that likely those streets are named for councilmen's daughters or wives or relatives.
Which makes far more sense.
Yeah. The thing to remember here is that Winnipeg was also a really small town.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in a very real sense. So if a councillor named a street Lily for no reason, someone might actually be suspicious. And at the time, there were still some pretty strict views towards, dating and sex.
Right.
That would have made that very frowned upon, even if prostitution was still occurring in Winnipeg.
Yeah, and even, some of the sex workers likely would have been well-known
to
some extent. I imagine if you called one, a street like Minnie or something, people would be like,
well, we know who this is.
We know who that is. What are you doing?
Yeah. So likely this is just because Guy Madden's film My Winnipeg claims that's where the street names come from, but it's not entirely true.
Yeah.
But it does lead to an interesting thing with street names, where what I noticed when I was looking into this is that there are streets like Lily that are named for someone's daughter, but then there are other streets that are named for prominent women. There's the woman's last name.
Right. Like Bannatyne.
Yeah.
Which I like to imagine is named for
the daughter and not.
Yeah, for the female Bannatyne and not the male Bannatyne.
Yeah, so
she was great.
Yeah. Bannatyne Street is named for the Bannatyne family. They were a Métis family in Winnipeg that owned a pretty significant chunk of land near the Red River down to like near Health Sciences Center, and their daughter Annie Bannatyne was, I guess, the wife Annie Bannatyne.
Yeah,
she
Annie
was the McDermott
Bannatyne
daughter.
Famously horsewhipped a man.
Yes,
who had written poorly about Métis women.
Yeah, she tracked him down to the front of, I think, her husband's store and then just beat him up.
Oh, amazing.
She was very cool. But like, this is a really easily debunked rumor, but it's still something you hear everywhere. It's so common.
And I guess like the grain of truth there is like, I mean, partly that, yes, the street names are women's names, but also partly that Winnipeg was this kind of like place where people were having like a moral panic about what's going on here, right?
Exactly. And I think to this day, like, it ties into that part of like, it's sensational, it's racy.
Yeah.
And it's more interesting that it was named for a politician's relative. Yes. So people still talk about it all the time. Mm-hmm. You also hear, this is the less common one. I don't know if you may have heard, the Arlington Bridge was built to span the Nile.
I don't think I had heard that, at least not until you had mentioned it to me.
Yeah. So this is a weird one. I hadn't really heard either, but it's not like we talked about the Arlington Bridge that often on tours. So just to inform everyone, the Arlington Street Bridge is a steel truss bridge that's built over the CPR roads in northern Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. And they were built in 1912. And they were really needed because the CPR track basically divided Winnipeg along northern and southern lines. Mm-hmm. And there were only a handful of places you could get across the street, namely like the Main Street area. But if you weren't near Main, you couldn't get to the north end without crossing a lot of very dangerous train tracks.
Right, and I guess that's probably a problem for a lot of people who are living in the north end and working downtown.
Yeah. So you had to commute somehow. So this bridge is built. Mm-hmm. And it cost tremendously little at the time. It was $205,000.
Okay.
From the Cleveland Bridge Company in England. Mm-hmm. And probably because of the low price, it caused problems immediately.
I have to be honest, I don't know how much a bridge would normally cost. But
I'll
take your word for it.
Apparently low for the time.
Yeah.
Streetcar drivers never wanted to drive on it.
Oh.
I don't know. Have you been on the Arlington Bridge before?
I have. It's weird.
Yeah.
For sure. I haven't been on it in quite a while.
It's my favorite bridge.
Yeah?
In the city. I don't know why.
I mean, fair enough.
I love looking down at the rail yards and the pigeons, and
it's a cool bridge.
It's a great, I don't know, it just feels like I'm in like the opening credits of the show Taxi.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But basically the bridge is a really steep decline and no place to brake.
Yeah.
So if you were taking a streetcar down on an icy road, you were going to slip. Like, drivers called it a suicide run, never did it.
Right, so you just got to make sure no one's in front of you, and then you go down like a toboggan hill.
Yeah. And then smoke from the trains actually damaged part of the bridge until plates were put on to cover that.
Oh.
So, like, structurally, the bridge caused problems immediately. Mm-hmm. And at no point did a streetcar ever go on that bridge.
See, this is not the first time Winnipeg has paid too little money for something and then it fell apart.
Yeah. So by the 1930s and 40s, people were starting to complain about the bridge being bad. Mm-hmm. And counselors are trying to pay for repairs, and reporters are making fun of it in the papers. And this is when the Nile connection starts to come up in press, so far as we can see.
So, like, what do they mean it was meant to span the Nile?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
There we go. So, basically, the story starts when a city councilor says the Arlington Street Bridge will always be a bugbear. It was built to go across the Nile, but was peddled off to the city of Winnipeg. The sooner the bridge comes down and a modern one goes up, the sooner the city will maintain expenses. So essentially, the story that had come out is that the Cleveland Bridge Company had made this bridge for the Nile, the Blue Nile specifically.
Okay.
And then whoever had tried to buy it didn't pick it up. So there was now just a bridge that this company owned and couldn't get rid of. And then Winnipeg bought it for cheap.
Aren't bridges usually built on location?
Well, the parts were made there and then shipped over.
Okay.
Especially if you look
Not
at
like they didn't bring like the entire bridge over.
No, they brought the parts. But like Winnipeg wouldn't have had the manufacturing capabilities to make a bridge that big in town in 1911.
Right. I see. Yeah.
There wasn't like a steelworks here that could have done that. Mm-hmm. So you had to buy it from elsewhere. So there's this big story that it was built for the Nile initially, and then we got it on cheap because it was basically on clearance.
Because they didn't pick it up. I love that.
Yeah. It's a very Winnipeg story, if nothing else.
I love the idea that someone commissioned a bridge, forgot about it,
And then Winnipeg was like, aha, free bridge.
Yeah.
Or cheap bridge.
Like in Winnipeg, we have the like free days, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure other cities do this too, where you just like pick things up off the curb.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that.
But with a bridge.
But with the bridge, it was just sitting on the boulevard in a box.
Except this rumor is debunked by 1965.
Okay.
So a reporter with the Winnipeg Tribune, Lillian Gibbons, thinks that the source of the rumor is actually because the Cleveland Bridge Company's letterhead shows the Nile,
Oh, that's dumb.
and that someone made that up.
Right.
So a big proponent of the rumor at the time was William Hearst. He was a city engineer, and he's the one who may have started this whole thing.
So maybe he just didn't like the bridge.
Maybe. It's possible. But then Carmen Lita Magnus with the Free Press does more digging in 1969, and she actually contacts the Cleveland Bridge Company to see if they have a record of a Winnipeg bridge. And they don't.
Oh.
So there's no record of it being made for Winnipeg.
Okay.
But she also talks to William Hearst, who says he's never seen any evidence it was built for the Nile.
Right.
So
So is it possible then that it was built for another city or something?
it's entirely possible, but there's no record one way or the other,
Right.
which is bizarre.
Yeah.
So the other weird thing is that when they were putting the bids out for the contract for the Arlington Bridge, they wanted two designs. One for basically a steel bridge and one for a truss span bridge with a plate girder design. We don't need to get into
I don't know what that
No, basically they wanted two designs for a bridge.
means. Right.
The Cleveland Bridge Company only submitted one
Okay.
at an extremely low price. So that $205,000 I was pitching was $33,000 cheaper than what someone else had proposed.
Okay, so that's quite a big savings.
Yeah. So they only put in one bid, though, which is super weird that they got it.
Right.
One bid with one design.
I guess if they were just undercutting everyone else that much.
So I don't know, it's a weird one because it's hard to say if it's definitively true or not because there's
Right.
no records.
So I feel like we can probably say that it was not built for the Nile in any case.
But the Cleveland Bridge Company did a lot of work in the Nile
Okay.
because England at the time was in the midst of colonizing North Africa.
Right.
So they were doing a lot of work for sort of colonial groups building bridges across rivers there.
Yeah.
So around 1910, they were doing at least two others in Africa.
Huh.
So it's not implausible,
Right.
but it's weird. And I do think maybe you can make the case that Winnipeg might have just bought a bad, cheap bridge.
That seems more likely. I can also see us buying a secondhand bridge, honestly.
Yeah, both things are extremely Winnipeg moves. That one's,
It's primarily the Nile thing that feels made up to me.
yeah.
But
Because,
yeah.
like, if it was a less well-known river, it might not have been as fun.
yes, if it was built to span, like, I don't know why I started that sentence. I'm not going to be able to name a less well-known river. What am I doing?
The Mackenzie River, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. This one was the weirder one to try and, like, debunk. Christian Cassidy, I will say, did a lot of the work on doing the research here.
We love Christian Cassidy.
He does a lot of good work.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. This one I'm not sure about. Like, I could see it being true, but you can also see someone, like, hearing a river and thinking the Nile instead.
Yeah.
Or just, like, it
And
sounds more exciting
especially-
than Winnipeg bought a bad bridge once.
Well, especially because there's no source to
Yeah, the
say
lack
that
of
that
sourcing-
did happen.
But no source say that it didn't either, right? There's no
Yeah.
contract for Winnipeg either.
Right.
It's a
Weird.
mystery
It's a mystery.
that maybe someone will solve eventually.
Yeah.
I personally think it's too sensational to be true,
Yeah.
just based on how these things tend to go. The other really big one is involving the Manitoba Legislature, which I'm sure you also heard about a lot.
Yes.
And in fact, I thought this story was true until like 2 years ago.
I know the one you're talking about, and I thought, I definitely thought this was true until very recently. People still tell this story
Yeah.
as if it's true. I think, well, I'll let you say what it was.
Nick, have you heard about what happened with the Manitoba Legislature?
I've heard some weird conspiracy stuff happen at the ledge, and that there's like Masonic.
Okay.
You know.
This has nothing to do with the Masons.
Okay.
This is more to do with the construction of the legislature in the first place,
Oh, okay.
which was a huge mess.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a really early political scandal in Winnipeg, where essentially the moment construction began in the legislature in around 1912, 1913, there were accounts of basically poor construction work and sort of missing money.
Right.
So Thomas Kelly was the hired contractor. And basically what had happened, if we're going to give you the really short version,
Yeah.
is Kelly had gotten hired because he had looked at the bids for the contract. So he knew what everyone else was offering to pay,
Oh.
and he said he could pay less.
I mean, charge.
Charge less.
Yes.
He would charge less, yes. And that got him the job.
Makes sense.
But once he got the job, he began to raise his price, claiming inflation. And over the course of the construction period, he managed to overcharge the government $892,000.
Oh my god.
That is worth about 19.5 million, closer to
Oh my
today's money.
God. And like Winnipeg was not like huge at that point. That's a ton of money.
That's a lot of money. So basically, the Liberal Party, who was not in power at the time, it was under the Conservative government this was happening.
Mm-hmm.
The Liberal Party got suspicious and then actually tried to reach out to the federal government to get an investigation. And then they actually paid an inspector to come in to look at what was going on. And the Conservative Party tried to cover things up. So they actually paid a provincial inspector to go into hiding in the States.
What?
Yeah, so William Salt was the inspector, and he had doctored his books to make sort of the amounts match for what they had paid for and what they were getting, but government officials thought he wouldn't stick to his story. So Salt went to Denver, Colorado.
That's excellent.
And a man was sent from Winnipeg with an envelope containing that money he was promised to escape.
What a way to cover up a scandal.
But the man who was sent to give him the money didn't make it because he was robbed or stole the money for himself. We don't know. William Salt never got the money he was bribed for.
Maybe just like don't send a man with an envelope of money somewhere.
Well, okay, here's the kicker. He went back to Winnipeg and got another $10,000.
Did he make it this time?
Yes.
Okay.
But then Salt went back to Winnipeg because he got tired of waiting.
Oh, jeez.
So finally, Salt agrees to take $10,000 in exchange for silence. But Kelly took a different approach, and he actually fled to Chicago in 1916.
Okay.
And then got caught by the RCMP and was brought back to face trial.
Right, so it was actually enough of a scandal that there were like charges placed.
Kind of.
Okay.
Okay, so basically what had happened
Yeah.
is that Kelly was taking all of this money back, and he was kicking some of it back to the provincial government. So Rodman P. Rodlin's Conservative Party was making money off of this inflation thing.
Okay.
And some of that money was going into his re-election campaign, allegedly.
Great.
So both Rodlin and Kelly were tried
Yeah.
for basically defunding or frauding the government.
Do you think that was like, was this something they arranged before he made the bid, do you think?
It's possible Kelly had worked on projects before and he was a well-known contractor, so he did likely know Rodlin.
Right.
It's not implausible that this was a thing they had worked out in advance.
Yeah.
Because someone had to
if he was able to see the bids.
someone had to let him do that.
Right.
So basically, Rodlin is tried. He goes for 4 trials and then is acquitted due to his ill health.
Okay.
But he lived for about 20 more years.
Huh.
Kelly is actually charged
Okay.
and spends about 9 months in jail. But the rumor goes he spent his 9 months in the warden's house.
Ah.
So he didn't know real time, but like
Yeah.
if all of this was proven to be true. So Kelly did do this, which meant he had friends in high places and knew
Right.
enough people to probably get special treatment in jail.
Yeah. So that part of it may be true.
Yeah.
So what's the bit?
What's the myth?
Yes. What's the myth?
So when you're talking about the story now, people always on this one little thing that Kelly didn't just steal money, he stole material.
yes.
So Thomas Kelly's house is not too far away from the ledge. It's not on Carlton, it's the street before that.
Edmonton?
Edmonton, I think.
I don't know.
It's near your apartment.
Yeah. Well, I don't know which direction.
Yeah.
You need.
Regardless. So it is
Closer to the ledge. It's Edmonton.
yeah, it's close to. And the front porch of the Kelly house had these big columns. Big classically styled ones that look awfully similar to the ones that they have at the Manitoba Legislature. So the story that is often told, and that I have told many times before, is that Kelly took pillars on the ledge, hauled them to his house, and set them up on his front porch.
Right. I'm pretty sure that they told this in tours of the legislature.
I think so too. Like, I think this is commonly accepted as true.
yeah.
But this one isn't actually that hard to debunk. Cameron McLean with CBC did all of the work on this.
Yeah.
But
Amazing.
actually, Lillian Gibbons, the same one that tried to debunk the Nile rumor in the 60s, did it with this as well.
Okay.
So the first evidence of this rumor is actually Lillian Gibbons debunking it.
Oh.
And then maybe that made it worse. I don't know.
So like people had already been talking about it, but then
Yeah.
oh, that's terrible that people hear that this rumor isn't true and just start talking.
Yeah. But I'm actually going to ask you, how do you think you'd go about disproving this? What would be your trick?
I guess what I'd try to do is figure out when his home was built.
That is the exact right answer.
Yeah.
Kelly's house was completed in 1909.
Okay.
The contract for the legislature wasn't awarded until 1911.
Oh,
So there
okay,
was 2 years before that even happened. So Kelly's house with the columns was there before the ledge even happened.
Right. And presumably the house complete with the columns.
Yeah. So, yeah, you could argue that maybe he added the columns later.
The columns? Yeah.
But if you look at the investigation documents, there's no reference to stolen material.
Okay.
So it probably did not happen.
And I feel like if they were doing all this thing, chasing him around and charging him and everything, they probably would have.
They would have noticed the missing columns, for sure.
Yeah, I also feel like, I mean, yes, Winnipeg had some huge scandals, but I feel like people would have noticed, and like it would have been in the Tribune if people were hauling columns.
Or if, like, mysteriously, they, like, a neighbor of Kelly's woke up and there were just new pillars in front of his house.
Right?
That would have been suspicious.
Like, Winnipeg was a tabloid town. There would have been rumors.
Gossip, yeah. So actually, one of Thomas Kelly's descendants puts this theory forward that maybe material theft was a way to take some of the heat off of Roblin's government.
Oh.
Like, to make Kelly look worse than Roblin did.
Right. Okay.
Which is possible. Both of them still come out looking really bad, no matter if the pillar story is true. But the pillar one is, I think, my favorite to debunk because, like, I was told that on tours growing up. I told that on tours when I was giving them.
Yeah.
This was debunked in 2018.
Right. It's stated as fact, but actually super easy to disprove in that way.
But it's like, it's a fun story. And
It's
if you
such
go past the Kelly house, it's now an apartment complex. But the columns are still there.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do know the one that
Yeah.
we're talking about. This might actually be on Carlton.
Yeah. Okay. So the apartments on Carlton, the Kelly House apartments.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I always look at it and I'm like, oh, it'd be nice if I could afford one of those.
So those were allegedly the stolen columns.
Right.
So it's like a tangible thing to point to and say, this is a part of our history. Here's a story about it.
I mean, that's great for a walking tour.
Yeah, right?
For starters.
It's perfect, but also tragically
and just, like,
not
so,
true.
Like, so ostentatious, right?
Yeah.
And like what guts a person would have to
to
steal
the columns from the legislature and put them up in front of their house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not quite as fun to be like, he stole money.
You stole a lot of money, in fairness.
The more common way of, like, stealing via materials, which was done in Winnipeg lots, was to be like, we're using expensive materials, and then not.
Yeah. That's a pretty classic grift.
Yeah.
Or like, whoops, we ordered too much.
Yeah.
Also been done before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is a really, really common one that just
That's a great
not
one.
true. But the last one we're going to talk about has, like, multiple facets to it.
Oh, boy.
Because it's tunnels.
Oh, the tunnels. I've heard so much about the tunnels.
Yeah, okay. So this one, Bruce Elwyn with the Free Press did most of the work on.
Okay.
He did a lot of really interesting articles, basically trying to figure out where all of the tunnels may be.
Right.
But, what tunnels have you guys heard of? Because I feel like there's, like, thousands of variants on what tunnels do and don't exist.
Yeah, I've heard... This is an odd one, because I feel like whereas, like, with the pillars and with the street names, the myth I hear is pretty consistent.
Yeah.
With tunnels, I've heard, like, 18 different things.
There are so many variants.
There's so many variants. I've heard that there are ones, like, under places near the Exchange where, like, there was bootlegging.
Mm-hmm.
And Al Capone's lawyer was involved or something like
Yeah,
that.
I heard that one too. And that one I couldn't find any evidence of
Yeah,
outside of
I
like a thing person had told me on a tour once.
Yes.
There's lots of like Capone in Saskatchewan rumors, I think.
Yeah.
And tunnels and
Well,
bootlegging.
definitively Capone was in Moose Jaw.
Right, yeah.
And what part of the Capone connection feels to me like we're trying to compete with a different prairie
Yes.
province.
I feel like part of it is like, oh, like fun, scandalous, criminal stuff, but also we want to be like a world-class city with like criminals whose names you've heard.
Like Moose Jaw.
Yeah. And not just like mom and pop distilleries in their basements, you know? Like
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around, I think. So I tried to sort of distill it down to the more common ones.
Right.
And not all of the weird variants I had heard, because there's no possible way to look into all of those.
So I think I've heard of ones by the Fort Garry.
Yep.
Under like various places in and around the Exchange. And one by the Saddlery, maybe someone told me.
I think I might have told you about that one. That might have been me.
That might have been you. Okay.
So the thing is, there are real tunnels in Winnipeg.
Okay.
We'll get into those later. I think we'll start with the fake ones and then move into what's
Sure.
real
Sounds
afterwards.
good.
But I think the catch is the real ones aren't as fun.
Yeah.
That's often what it is.
That's often how these are. What a terrible podcast episode we've made.
Hey guys, everything interesting you've ever heard isn't true. But we're going to start in probably a fitting place for this, the Exchange District, which is one of the older neighborhoods in Winnipeg. It's got a bunch of turn-of-the-century heritage buildings. So it is a fitting place for sort of debauched crime rumors, I think, essentially.
I mean, it still feels like a fun...
It feels old-timey.
Yeah.
So basically the rumor is that the exchange is sort of covered by this network of secret tunnels.
Yes.
That during Prohibition, which was about 1917 to 1923-ish, was used to smuggle rum. And I think we'll start with maybe talking about rum running first. Because frankly, you didn't really need to smuggle rum.
No, you really didn't.
Like, it's a cool idea if you're, say, in Moose Jaw near the American border. Because then you're getting rum across the border, because American prohibition laws were much stricter in Manitoba.
Yeah.
There were so many ways to float prohibition laws in this province.
Yeah.
You could get a prescription for booze for your horse. And that was somehow okay.
Like, if you had the money, you could also just import liquor for most of prohibition from outside the province. Absolutely. So the hard part is sneaking it across state lines. Right.
So you might see it more in, like, Emerson. I don't think anything like that. There was rum running in Emerson, but you just walked across the border in a field.
Right, because...
and tried to make a break for it.
Like, during most of American prohibition, we didn't have prohibition here.
Yeah.
So,
it's really easy.
You don't need the tunnels. you just take it.
Also, like, you probably weren't going to be drinking downtown.
Right.
There were bars downtown that you could maybe, like, sneak some booze into, but if you're drinking in Manitoba during Prohibition, it's likely in your own home. Mm-hmm. So, Ian Carr, who wrote a whole book on the history of Prohibition in Manitoba, estimated that on some Winnipeg streets, every third or fourth house had a bootlegger inside of it. So accessing liquor was not hard. There was no reason to be smuggling rum underground throughout the busiest neighborhood in the city.
I make wine in my one-bedroom apartment,
yeah.
So I won't claim that it's good wine.
But you could. And, I mean, I think more than all of that, there aren't any tunnels to run through.
Okay.
So there's actually only,
that's a problem.
only one genuine old tunnel in the exchange, and that is between the Salary on Market.
Okay.
So in the early 1900s, this was home to the Great West Salary Company, owned by Elias Hutching. Mm-hmm. And he had a storefront and a warehouse on opposite ends of the street. And basically underneath the street was a tunnel where he could ship goods back and forth.
Right.
So you could ship goods to your storefront from your warehouse without ever going outside into, say, the blistery winds.
I mean, that sounds nice.
Yeah, it was not a bad idea. It had like a wooden cart that you could push things through.
Yeah.
So it was a full human-sized tunnel, but it was just used to ship salary goods.
Right. I guess
which
it's
is stuff for horses.
Same idea as, I don't know, the Winnipeg Underground.
Yeah, it's similar.
Just a place to walk through.
But Hutchings actually found some pretty good use for this during the 1919 Winnipeg General Strike. Because it meant no one could see his employees working because they were always underground.
Oh, the jerk.
He was not labor sympathetic. This is a man who locked out employees if they even went to like a union meeting.
Oh my God.
He was not a nice man.
Yeah.
And he tried to get his son...
But he did have a tunnel.
He did have a tunnel, but the tunnel was filled in 1980.
Oh, okay.
So the tunnel is no longer there because the businesses there are no longer owned by the same person.
Oh, okay. So what were you going to say about his son? Sorry.
Just like a fun story about Hutchings being the worst. He tried to get his son exempted from the draft in World War I by saying he was essential to business services. To be clear, his son was not.
Classic rich people nonsense.
And actually several disgruntled employees complained to the government saying Hutchings was lying and his son didn't get drafted.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He's an interesting character in Winnipeg history. There is a street named for him, actually.
Okay.
But that is the one tunnel in the exchange that is actually real to my knowledge.
But not in fact there anymore.
No, but there were sort of underground spaces.
Yeah.
I feel like with any sort of boomtown city, the buildings are jam-packed really tight together, so there's not a lot of like extra space for storage.
Yeah.
So if you have a building that's on like a sidewalk, you can build your basement underneath the sidewalk.
Okay, yeah.
So they have more like expanded space below ground. So if you are, say, digging into a sidewalk and you find a hole in the ground, you might think, aha, I found the tunnel, but it's just the basement of the building nearby.
Right.
And you can see some of this actually still in use. If you're on Main Street and pass by the Woodbine Hotel, there's a big metal plate in the ground.
Yes.
And it's where they put the beer in. They still use this sort of extra basement space.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I see them doing that all the time. They there's like almost like a ramp that goes down into it, and they just sort of push the boxes down.
Yeah, and it slides down into it.
Yeah.
So a lot of businesses would have used spaces like that for storage, essentially, and not much else.
And there are a couple of like underground walkways. Like there's one but these are more recent.
I was going to get into those later.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, don't worry, we're getting to them. They're the less exciting ones.
Yeah.
So we're going to, those are safe for the last ones. There's also something like Ashdowns who would have built basically storage containers underground that were further away from the main building.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
So there was a reason for Ashdown to do this. This is Ashdown Store is the Crocus building now, just for those who don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it was basically a very early department store, and they sold everything from like paint to tools to furniture to gunpowder.
I used to take dance lessons there.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What dance did you take?
I did jazz and tap.
Very cool.
Thank you.
But famously in 1904, there was a fire in the Exchange District that hit the Ashdown Building. And their gunpowder was just stored on the first floor.
Oh.
And the building did explode.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So, after that, they built basically basement cellars to
Okay.
store the gunpowder and properly in vaults.
Right. Does that prevent the explosion? I
It
guess...
might make it less damaging to the upper levels of your
Oh,
building.
okay. Yeah.
Because, like, that building was raised.
Right.
There's a photo of it, and it's just a pit in the ground where the building used to
Jeez.
be.
Yeah. I guess maybe also it's easier to prevent the fire from getting to
From
the cellar.
spreading,
Yeah.
even to, like, the rest of the neighborhood, because the fire hall itself in the Exchange caught fire in
Yeah.
that one.
Oh, no.
It was a big deal. And then, finally, there is famously the old underground jail, which stood from about 1873 to 1883. So it was on a small lot.
Okay, so that's not very long, actually.
No, it's not long at all. But the essence is that Winnipeg had a bit of a jailbreak problem prior to 1873. The jail we had was in Upper Fort Garry. It was guarded by one guard, and it was really easy to break out of if you just got a mob together.
Right.
So, like, if Nick got arrested, we might go break him out, and they would just give up because it was too hard to deal with. That's generally what happened. There was, like, one time where someone got freed from jail, and then the mob leader got arrested, and the guy that had been in jail came back around and broke him out again. The government was just like, "Ugh, we're tired."
Early Winnipeg was wild.
It's a lot of really weird stuff like that. So
Yeah.
the solution was this underground jail, which had like one access trap door through the courtroom.
Right.
So
it's
you
a
go
little
up and
easier to
down. It's harder to
protect.
break out
Yeah.
of. So it involved very cramped underground jail cells. But that was only there for like a decade, and then the courthouse was torn down, but the jail cells remained.
Okay.
They just built the West Clements block on top of it, so that would have been, I think, 495 Main Street would have been the actual address. It's now a park. So the Clements block burns down in 1979, and they build Bijou Park, which is right next to Old Market Square and the Cube today.
Oh, right. Okay.
And during that process, they find the old jail cells.
Ah,
They're
that's
still
fun.
there. And one of them had apparently just been filled floor to ceiling with old typewriters
What?
because it had been storage for the office.
Oh,
It was
right.
just the basement for them. It wasn't like a jail anymore.
Right. I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
But they filled that in.
Oh,
So that's gone too.
Winnipeg.
But like that wasn't connected to anything either.
Yeah.
It was just an underground space that was kind of like tunnel-y.
Yes.
There
It would
is,
still be fun to find.
yeah.
But
So that's basically the end of like the Rum Running connection, because the other ones tend to have more to do with sex work.
okay.
There's basically two
Interesting.
categories that I found, and it's rum running or smuggling sex workers. Those are the two uses of tunnels in sort of common lore.
Right.
So one actually involves the exchange, and it's that, do you know where the old Leland Hotel used to be?
No.
So it's on William near where Patterson Global Foods is.
Okay. Yes.
So it's right on the edge of Old Market Square, and that burned down in like the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But the rumor goes that in the early 1900s, there was a tunnel between the Leland and City Hall.
Oh.
So like a politician could sneak off to the Leland and go like have a like midday rendezvous with his mistress.
we really love to tell stories about our politicians and
Having
sex
affairs.
workers.
Yeah, it's very weird. So like this one's pretty easy to debunk because that couldn't be true,
right.
because that land connect between where the Leland was and where City Hall was like notoriously unstable.
Oh.
So there used to be a creek running through the Exchange District called Browns Creek.
Yeah.
And we had tried to build our first City Hall on top of it.
Right.
Yes.
And our first City Hall fell into it.
It lasted what, like 10 years?
It
Something
lasted
like that?
10 years, and then we built the new one.
Yeah.
So, like, you couldn't build a tunnel through there. It would just fall apart. That
Oh,
can't
yeah.
exist. It's completely unfeasible.
Yeah. All these politicians and sex workers just buried in the tunnel. Yeah. It's horrible.
What a horrifying picture you're painting.
I mean, I have to imagine, too, that, like, the accounting in Winnipeg was not so bad that we would not have noticed if City Hall funds had gone to building an entire tunnel.
Yeah. And you can also look at old fire maps for the area, because a fire map would show if there's an underground space.
Yeah.
And none of them show tunnels.
Right.
They just show, like, the extended basement spaces.
So where do you think that comes from?
Part of me genuinely thinks this is, like, desire to compete with Moose Jaw.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
my best guess. I can, like...
Does Moose Jaw have real tunnels?
Yeah, Moose Jaw was, like, known for Capone rum smuggling because it's right by
Okay.
the border, so there's
Right.
a whole tunnel network you can do tours of.
Oh, okay. So we're like, hey, we have tunnels too.
Yeah, like, look at us. We've also
But
got
not.
them. But then also maybe it's like someone found a creepy part of a basement and thought like maybe this went somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's hard to prove.
So the other tunnel that I've heard a lot about is the Fort Garry
Yes, which was also allegedly used for smuggling sex workers to the
Okay.
hotel.
Right.
So
Do you need to smuggle sex workers into a hotel?
no, I don't think so. Here's the thing. I feel like they're putting in a lot of extra steps that don't need to be there and probably weren't there for having, like, affairs.
Yes.
I think it would have been much easier than making it out to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a rumor that between the Union Station and the Fort Garry Hotel, there is a tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Allegedly so that if you were coming into town from, like, Union Rail, you could just go downstairs and cross the street and go into your very nice hotel and never have to brave the Winnipeg weather.
Well, that does sound nice.
Except it's not real.
Yeah.
There is kind of a, like, tunnel there, but it's, like, for a steam pipe. So it's a trench for a pipe to go in.
Okay.
It supplies heat to the buildings.
Like, could you fit through it?
No.
Oh.
No, and you probably couldn't fit, like, hotel guests in their luggage. It's literally a trench for a pipe.
Darn.
Yeah. But
I do like imagining people, like, crawling through a steam tunnel with their, like,
Like army
roll on.
so this may come from actually something that is real, though.
Okay.
So prior to the 1970s, there was the Royal Alexandria Hotel
Yes.
across from the CPR station on Higgins, and there was a tunnel between those.
Oh.
So the Royal Alexandria for a while was basically as high class as the Fort Garry.
Mm-hmm.
Most rail lines wanted a, like, prestigious hotel to be across the street to attract high-end guests.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were coming to the CPR station, you would actually go underground and just walk to the hotel,
Mm-hmm.
which was, like, very high class at the time, but then torn down in the 70s. The CPR station was no longer used in the 70s, and the tunnel was filled in.
Yeah.
But my best guess is that people are now conflating the luxury hotel tunnel with the only existing luxury hotel.
That
Right?
makes sense, right? Because the Alexandria isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And the station isn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And if we're going to make wild, baseless claims, also, the Royal Alexandria is nearer to where the sex work was happening in Winnipeg.
Ah, that's true.
I don't think it was ever actually used for smuggling sex workers,
No.
but, like, if we want to funnel a rumor, here's a good place
There
to
we
do
go.
it.
No, probably just used to stay warm. Actually, when I went to Casa Loma in Toronto, that has a tunnel
Oh, interesting.
between, like, basically the kind of, like, garage / like stables area
Yeah.
and the house,
Mm-hmm.
which was just used so they didn't have to cross the street
Yeah.
or go outside in the winter.
Very practical.
So, like, that use of a tunnel is actually not insane. I feel like they weren't as commonly actually used for, like, sneaking things.
No, I feel like the default response to, like, a tunnel wasn't used for crime
Yeah.
is very weird.
It is. Usually, at least in Canada, what it is for warmth.
Yeah, like, oh, we don't want to go outside anymore. It's way too cold.
Yes.
But there are other examples of, like, underground spaces in Winnipeg existing well throughout our history. So in 1917, there were 5 public underground washrooms.
Oh.
They were, like, added on pretty steadily from about 1914 to 1917. They were on Market Avenue, Fort Street, Garry Street, Selkirk Avenue, and Logan Avenue.
So what is an underground washroom?
They were built beneath the street so they wouldn't take up retail space.
Okay.
So there would have been, like, an entrance that would have had stairs leading down.
That sounds horrifying.
They
To-
were actually supervised, is the thing. Because they wanted
Huh.
to ensure cleanliness. Winnipeg
Right.
at the time would have been, like, fairly bustling with, like, high-class businessmen.
Yeah.
So you want a nice, clean, friendly bathroom.
In the basement.
Yeah. So they hired attendants.
Okay.
There were 2 for each station. The stations were
Wow.
open from 6 a.m. to midnight Monday to Saturday and from noon to 10 p.m. on Sundays.
Jeez.
Note there's time to go to church in the morning before hitting up the downtown bathrooms. Once cars were becoming more common in Winnipeg across the 20s and 30s, these bathroom access points were actually blocking off road space.
Oh, okay.
So there was a push to close them in the 1940s that didn't go through. And then they would flood sometimes,
oh, that's
especially like
not
in
great.
1950. So they were
Yeah.
shut down and demolished by about 1979.
It's funny because there's a push now to try and reintroduce
Public washrooms
public
like that.
washrooms. I mean, it's a nightmare sometimes trying to find a washroom
I
down
mean,
here.
I spent a good chunk of today trying to find a washroom.
Yeah.
And then Alex very nicely let me use hers. But yeah, it was like a real thing in Winnipeg. There was these underground bathroom spaces. And apparently, in 1948, an average of about 5,844 men and around 1,000 women used them.
Wow. Yeah, I have to say, toilets underground, not quite as exciting as, like, tunnels used by sex
No.
workers.
Now, the bathrooms did look nice. Like, the entrance points were, like, stately and kind of Edwardian.
Do we have photos?
I'll show you one later.
Okay,
We do
cool.
have photos.
Cool.
So there is that for, like, a cool underground space.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like we're smuggling booze through them. But the one very real tunnel network we do have is at the Manitoba Legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And this connects a number of provincial buildings, including the Ledge, Vaughan Street Jail, the Law Courts, the Winnipeg Auditorium, which is now the Provincial Archives, the Woodsworth Building, and the Norquay Building, and the Remand Center.
Cool.
So there is kind of a rumor that they were used to help politicians escape in case of like a mob attack on the legislature.
Okay.
The threat of that was pretty low at any given point, but what they're actually used for is supplying power, heat, and water to very important government buildings.
And I guess, again, for warmth, I mean, it's probably just nice to be able to, like, if you need to be at the courts or whatever.
You don't really get to use them.
Oh, no?
No, because they are just for power.
Oh, okay.
There are pictures of them. There's, like, big pipes running along the walls because they just supply power to government
so they're
buildings.
not, like, a walkway, really.
Yeah, so they're actually, like, they have their own separate power supply that would have been different from Winnipeg, so they weren't, like, relying on Winnipeg power necessarily.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the fun anecdote with these is that in 1917, right around when the tunnels were being built, a prisoner from Vaughan Street Jail did escape from it.
Oh, no.
He was working in the tunnel helping build it, which was
right.
a jail thing at the time. You had to work. So he managed to escape from the tunnels, and then he ran out of the law court building.
Yeah.
And they found him at home a few hours later drinking. And he got sent back to jail.
Oh, man.
He tried.
Good try.
Going back to his house was maybe the part where the plan fell apart.
Yeah. And then getting drunk. Like, maybe wait.
Yeah.
Maybe get further and then do that.
But it's a fairly expansive tunnel network.
That's cool.
Which is real and no one knows about. And I think that would be the one you could actually make rumors up about.
Yeah. There's also an underground walkway between the Centennial Center and the City Hall.
Yeah.
But it's almost always locked, which is annoying.
Yeah. Well, what that was built for. So this walkway was built in the 1960s to connect sort of the Centennial Complex to the Public Safety Building where the parkade was. So the theory was this was a parkade that could then connect you to the Arts Center. So if you were, say, coming in from out of town, you park in the Public City Building parkade, and then you use the tunnel to get to the concert hall.
Right.
At no point do you face the Winnipeg streets to go see a show.
That's, lovely.
But the Public Safety Building and the parkade are now torn down, and that walkway is now locked because functionally all it does now is connect City Hall to the concert hall.
Yes, and...
which no one really needs anymore.
No, City Hall at least used to have a restaurant, so it kind of could be a thing. I don't know.
No, not really anymore, though.
No, but it doesn't anymore, so it doesn't... And then, of course, we have at Portage and Main.
Yes, infamously, there is the Winnipeg Square Tunnel.
Yes, a weird quirk of Winnipeg, which is that we...
cannot cross our main street.
Cannot cross our main street.
So at Portage and Main, instead of crossing above ground, you have to take a staircase downstairs into a roundabout, basically, that funnels you off in different directions.
Yeah.
And it is confusing if you don't know where you're going.
Yeah, I directed a friend of mine who was visiting town through there once because it was, like, cold. So I advised her to go through there and realized afterwards I was like, oh, the poor girl. I've hopelessly doomed her.
One of my first major times downtown, I was doing the Backstage Pass program at MTC, so I was around 16. And it was like a morning theater program you would do. And my dad had to work downtown, so he drove me in, and he dropped me off at the Richardson Building and said, I'll see you in a few hours. Goodbye. And left me to try and figure out how to cross the street to get to MTC and like navigate the underground by myself at 16. I didn't have a cell phone with a map.
Yeah.
I had a chunky Bluetooth. I did make it, and it was fine. But it was a very confusing experience, and I learned fast.
Yeah, I actually kind of like the underground now, which I know is weird. I think that's an unpopular
I think so.
opinion. But yeah, the first time I had to take it was my first day of a job.
Yeah.
And it was, horrifying trying to, run through it, and I was getting all sweaty trying to get to this job on time.
It's confusing if you don't know where you're going in it. But again, a very real tunnel is just not an exciting one.
Yes.
But you can sort of see, there are existing underground spaces. Winnipeg did have, sort of a criminal history to it, so you can see why you'd make these connections.
Yes.
But just a lot of them aren't true.
Most of our criminal history just happened above ground.
Yeah. We were not ashamed of it.
No.
No, apparently not. So, I mean, I'm sure I've missed some Winnipeg urban legends.
I thought of another one. Can I tell quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do either of you know about the time Groucho Marx met Charlie Chaplin in Winnipeg?
Yes, I've heard of that, and I was going to debunk it, and then it just seemed like it was too true to talk about.
It's something that, Groucho would tell this story.
Yeah.
Because it was the first time he met Chaplin.
Yeah.
And I guess that he got off a train, he had an hour and a half to kill, and he heard laughter. And he heard it was so loud that he heard it blocks away. And he followed the laughter, and he wound up at the Empress Theater, which is now the Met, right?
Yeah.
And Chaplin was performing, and he just waited for the show to end and waited in the wings, and then let himself into the dressing room, and Chaplin was there having a drink, and Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd heard originally, I heard that they met like just wandering around at the corner outside the Walker Theater. That's what my old film prof told me. But then
Okay.
there's a National Post
Yeah.
piece that really like breathes some life
Yeah.
into this myth or truth, whatever it is. But yeah, that's one that I always thought was kind of neat because it's like, yeah, only in Winnipeg.
It's a genuine like Hollywood connection that we have.
Yeah,
too.
in 1921, these two legends
Just,
met
like, yeah.
for the first time and probably became friends
Yeah.
throughout their careers and stuff. But
There was this anecdote Marx told later that he was walking around like Charlie Chaplin, like a penguin, to his brothers to convince him to go see the show. But that does tie into sort of a Charlie Chaplin rumor that he decided to go into film while he was staying in Winnipeg,
oh,
which is also just, I think, true. There's like a letter that proves it.
wow.
So he was staying at, it was the LeClaire Hotel, I don't know what it is now, but it's an existing hotel, and if you go down one of sort of downtown streets, there is a Charlie Chaplin figure in the window of it.
Oh, that's
yeah.
nice.
So he was staying there, and he wrote to his brother saying, like, I want to start making movies.
cool.
And he sent it on the hotel's letterhead. So there's some actual proof that it was from like
that's neat.
1917-ish this happened.
Yeah, I mean, we do actually have a pretty significant kind of like celebrity history in that
Yeah.
way because like Winnipeg was such a vaudeville hotspot.
Yeah.
So
But then we just make up stories that
yeah.
are worse.
like Harry Houdini did actually come here and do a pretty cool performance.
Yeah. He hung himself off of the Carleton Street Winnipeg Free Press building
Yeah.
in the middle of February, and like a crowd of 5,000 people watched it happen.
And there's super cool photographs of that.
Yeah.
But no, let's make up things about tunnels.
Let's say Capone was here. But like Chaplin saying he's going into film here is like a really sort of significant film history tidbit because
Yeah.
he's like one of the earliest film pioneers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna add that one to the list, and then it looked to be too true. So there wasn't like a process of debunking it we could go through. I'm like, well, there's a letter from the hotel.
Like maybe a couple of details are off, but you know.
Yeah, like the gist of the story is still the same.
Yeah.
But I feel like most cities also have their own weird urban legends. I'm sure there's some in Toronto too that don't like go away.
Yeah.
I don't know if you picked up on any when you were there.
I don't know if I picked up any that I'd like be comfortable saying if they're true or not. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they're fun, scandalous stories. I don't think in
They're
doing
fun.
this episode I'm going to stop anyone from saying any of them.
No, I'd be interested if people have heard other ones
Yeah.
to hear what other myths and legends people have heard.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Like, tell us. We're interested.
I mean, a lot of the other ones that we, you know, haven't really touched on here are like paranormal type ones.
Yeah, those
Which-
are not as... They're not easy to debunk.
No, because that is just like, do you believe that?
Do you
they're-
believe in ghosts exist?
or like
yes or no?
aliens or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you can look at building records and say if a tunnel definitively does or does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
Though I did also start my own urban legend once. I believe I've told you about this.
What
This-
was that?
Relating to how easy they are to spread.
Mm-hmm.
When I was president of the History Students Association at the U of W, I did an interview with the Uniter. It was my first year doing tours of the Exchange District Biz, and we did tell ghost stories because they would hook kids
Right.
on a tour pretty easily. So we talked a lot at the Pantages Theater about ghosts there. Mm-hmm. And over the course of doing that, people would tell me like, oh, once my friend had this happen to them at the theater or X or Y or Z.
Right.
And whatever ghost allegedly haunts the theater likes to play tricks, apparently.
Ah, okay.
So in the Uniter, I said, it's apparently the Pantages, like Alexander Pantages himself haunts the theater.
Right.
And I said, Alexander Pantages is a bit of a dick. And that got quoted verbatim. Which I don't know why I was surprised by that.
Just confused about how interviews work.
I was like 22 and dumb, I guess is the answer to that. But then like a year later, someone did a ghost story article and they said he was a jerk. Which is like almost the exact
Yeah.
phrasing I use. And then someone else asked me about that on a tour once. And I was like, I think I did that because no one had really like compiled the stories before.
Yeah.
So maybe I started an urban legend. I'll say I did.
About the ghost of Alexander Pantages.
Who I don't
Love it.
believe in either.
No.
I just thought it was a fun story. So they're easy to spread and make up on your own, and you should try it at home.
Yeah.
Is the moral of all of this. Invent a new tunnel in Winnipeg and convince someone it's real.
Yes, please.
But thank you for listening. That's been One Great History. This is the last episode of our first season. We were doing a 6-episode trial run to see if Alex and I liked working on this together. And I think we do.
I think we do.
Wonderful. So follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram on One Great History. We're on Twitter at the #1 Great History. And you can follow us or check out our website for sources and pictures at onegreathistory.wordpress.com. follow us there and we'll let you know when we're working on new stuff. Thank you.